Check, check. All right, we're live. Got another work session going on here. Continuing with the character creation section of the Tales of the Harrowed Land RPG document that I've been working on. Quite diligently. A friend of mine said he was shocked the amount that I was on here getting things done, and I said, well, that's part of it, right? Keep yourself accountable. It's part of why I'm doing this. Besides, it's just fun. Just as a note, anyone out there, feel free to say hi in chat. No obligation. You're welcome to just hang out and lurk. And give my usual pitch. I guess I better update this. It's a good place to start the pitch, right? So, if you were watching this on Twitch, obviously you know where I am. Please head over to YouTube and subscribe to the Fox and Boar Games YouTube channel. That's where I'm going to be archiving all of these chats, and I'll be creating other content there. Of course, Twitter, Facebook, Fox and Boar Games. Tales of the Heart. Well, this is going to be changing, so you're welcome to go there. HarrowedLandRPG.com. But the big news is that we have the Fox and Boar website up and rolling. That was my project for this weekend. And some of you popped in to see me working on it on Saturday, I believe I was on. I'll share that. But anyway, yeah, please like, subscribe, support all these various things. That helps me do this. That helps me grow my following and make this become a thing. And let me just switch this over here. Let's just take a look at the Fox and Boar website. Guess I should select the right thing first, right? And there we are. There's the new website. So, I did all the design on this. Art by Jeff Arsenault. Joseph Arsenault. I've always known him as Jeff, but his name's Joseph. Let me shoot you a little shout out here. So, of course, I'm featuring Tales of the Harrowed Land on the front page. That's my primary game project right now. Put this, post this out there. As usual, thanks everyone for coming on. It's thrilling to be able to do this as a thing. As a reality. I'll make my usual joke. 15-year-old me back in the 80s would never have imagined I'd be able to write a game as part of my full-time job, and hopefully maybe a full-time job. Oh, dare I say that? Dare I say that I can eventually do some aspect of this combined with, of course, media production and all that as part of a thing. We got it. Hey, here we go. What's going on, Russ? Good to see you. Yeah, that's all I'm doing, hanging out while I work. As I said earlier in the stream, it keeps me accountable. A friend of mine this weekend said, "Boy, you're on there a lot." I'm surprised how much you're doing and getting getting done on there. And I said, well, the only way to do it is to do it. And one of the motivations of doing it is knowing that you set up these times and saying, yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing now. Did that not post? I really thought that posted. Oh, I know why. That's weird. I swear. Meta slash Facebook it just makes everything worse every time it updates. I have to go through so many hoops now to post from either a page or my profile, and I used to be able to just do a drop down box of make this a profile post, make this a page post. Which page would you like? Now it's like this kind of. All right, maybe I'll actually get to work. Well, anyway, yeah, here's the site as it stands as of now. My graphic and old IT training kicked in a little bit this weekend. I mean, part of what I teach is graphic design, even if not a pure classic design class anymore, for the most part. Though I have mostly digital imaging, how it relate, making content for games, media content for gaming. That's mostly what I've been teaching recently, audio production, but the big news is hopefully maybe by next week we'll be announcing a couple more games that we're going to publish. That I should say we intend to publish. So all the links that are all over the place now all point to this site. So the Harrowed Land RPG will take you to these pages. The From the Tomes site, link from the Tomes link will now take you to this. I've kind of centralized everything, which really needed to happen. Because when someone says, well, tell me about what you're doing, and you have game related, you have 10 different links, people are never going to sit through that these days. About, dress for the job you want. That's what I decided I was going to do. I said, well, I could do a formal photo shoot, selfie, whatever. No. My sort of Tulsa Doom barbarian, dark fantasy look. It's a little bit about me. And then, of course, your obligatory contact page, which has nothing exciting on it except a form. Well, it has has more on the YouTube. Yeah, hopefully we'll get more media. We'll get more photos. We'll get stuff like that going on here. I've already tentatively talked to other people about working with the game company. I mean, obviously it's just me right now because that's all I can afford. But I have a friend that's going to consider doing some webmastering if things pick up and I'm really not focusing on the web at all. And she's got a history of doing this for games and gamers. My editor, who I hope to hire on for the final edits of the project. Hopefully the about will expand to more than just my vanity page. That's all right, because I'm doing all the work. So it could be my vanity page. Blog is thin right now, but hopefully we will be adding more news. So with that, here's where we are with this. Back to working on the character development section of the site. If anyone writes or creates, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anybody that going back through some of what I wrote years ago, forget about it being horribly written because it was mostly just notes. It's just there's so many inconsistencies internally now with the rules and how they've evolved. Yesterday, I kind of went down this rabbit hole where I started rewriting 2 or 3 skills instead of just working on this section down here. The skills section of this document. I think my next step, which I'll probably get to later this week, is to make a little cheat sheet, a little quick creation document. Quick character creation guidelines. Games are pretty famous for that. Like, make your character in 10 minutes. Then figure out what it all does later. Just so people can jump in and start playing around with the system. I guess that means I should probably rewrite the character sheet as well. Yeah, so I had to go back through and give a brief, succinct description of what all these skills do and how the player should choose them for the character. And then I realized, wow, I gotta go back and reread all those skills. So I'm going to finish this document off today and go jump into the skills a little bit, or maybe I'll rework the character sheet in the quick creation document. Talk about Lucra. That was a late addition to the game. If you're familiar with Call of Cthulhu, it's like your credit rating. It's what your character can spend without having to nitpick over every single little purchase. My character needs twine. I gotta find a twine vendor. Then you gotta subtract 2 pieces, which is like pennies, today's pennies, equivalent thereof. All right. I joke around that someone watches one of these streams, they see me. Most of what they see me doing is sitting there Googling something, like correct terminology, or language structure, or something, or going and consulting other documents that I'd already written. It's very exotic. I wrote for probably about 4 hours yesterday, and I was spending a huge amount of the time just cross-referencing what I had already stated. Yeah, Tom, I don't know about that. Tom Curzon said that he could try to log in between saw cuts, in between he's doing a bunch of renovation on a house he and his partner bought. And I'm like, yeah, don't get distracted. Don't lose a hand or something over my stream. I bet I'd get a lot of hits, though, wouldn't I? If that became a selling point. Sorry, Tom. Hands expendable. I mean, some of the skills I have listed in this original document don't even exist anymore, and I have a bunch that were not available at that point. So skills, so I guess picking the character culture is the next. Oh, that's a big part. Let's actually go back in and format this and put some actual narrative in here as well. Let's see. Guess I'll throw on the webcam. Oh, hey, there's Tom. How's it going? The other Tom, not the Tom who just said he'd log in between making cuts in his wall with a saw. I was like, yeah, I don't know if you want to do that. Let's see. I just realized I realized this wasn't back on. I think you already saw it, Tom. The website's up. The Fox and Boar website is up. That's my big news for today. I'll put this in for anybody else. happens to wander onto the site. Sort of thing that I always take for granted. Basically saying maybe you should think about a character concept that actually fits in with what your game master has planned. And it's kind of amazing when like I go on a thread on a board and there's this kind of discussion and a bunch of players are like, "Oh, doesn't matter. I'm just gonna make whatever character I want." I'm like, I get it, but I also now I know it's not your job to provide content for the game master. It's a little weird to me if you just arbitrarily decide, yeah, I'm gonna play a vicious gladiator, and it's an entirely political, non combative scenario. Which doesn't seem like you're gonna have fun. Maybe you will. I mean, yeah, you can make your own fun, right? Will you be making your own fun at the expense of other players? Who knows? Yeah, I had a bunch of errands to do this morning. In fact, I pretty much just got done with everything just at 2 o'clock, so I just kicked on the stream and got settled. Uh, yeah, again, I, I always say, especially for like D&D, I'm very open. Like we discussed with character types and races, I'm up to all kinds of weird stuff. Even if it kind of doesn't fit in a game like that, you can really make it fit. But when you start getting into these kind of more story driven games, playing a character that you absolutely know has no place in the environment is is just a pain, and maybe you think it's funny or cute or whatever, or you just really want to play a type of character, and as long as it can be rationalized, that's cool. But the number of times I've had, and this all, I'm actually leaning towards this week's chat Wednesday night being about problem players, and we've already discussed the issue with even calling someone a problem player. Like there's all these layers that go on. I mean, I know in one or two social groups I was considered the problem simply because I wouldn't just shut up and go along with everybody else, right? Like, so there's always that, right? There's always that loaded situation. But there's just a certain personality of player who's just bent on being disruptive, either overtly or not so overtly. And like the vast majority of them, one of the red flags to me is when you carefully lay out what a story's about or a campaign's about, and the first thing they do is just choose something that won't fit. And to me, that's always just one of those signals like, okay, I mean, part of this comes from, now being in a college classroom for 20 years too. And seeing similar behavior patterns among students who just like you're just trying to be a PITA, And is it for attention? Is it for just because you think it's funny? Like, and this doesn't end like at college because like it was, I don't know, about 12 years ago. I think I mentioned it in another podcast or another broadcast. I had this exact situation. I had a guy come into the group who just, I mean, he became problematic in other ways, and I touched on that. But he was really like, the first hint was that like whenever we would start something, he would just come up with that one thing that won't work in it and try to rationalize it. And I'm like, I just gave you 10 options and you picked the 11th that really won't work, and I've already said I'd really prefer you don't do that. So again, it's weird. It's weird. But in a game like this that's so story driven, I mean, it's kind of difficult if somebody's like, "Oh yeah, I don't know, maybe I should just throw this entire culture section right up front." Stats before concept. Go over all the how to and the integrations of stats before I give deep character concept, or oh god, I have the gift section to do that I totally rewrote. So I just want to watch the world. Yeah, I mean, it can be funny. And like I said, I understand some people, that's just how they like to play these games, and I get it. But sometimes I'm like, dude, just stop. Somebody just want to watch World Burn, yeah. And I get it. I get having that kind of anarchistic streak and like, let's see what happens. But, I always go back to the fact, all right, like, depending on the climate of the group, you might be wasting the energy and time of like up to 4 or 5 other people. And I guess I've just become really conscientious of that as life has progressed. I'm going to put this chat window over here so I can keep an eye on it. Yeah, I guess because we're not playing old school D&D where you roll your stats and then make your character around it, I should actually talk a little bit more about the character and concepts and whatnot before I start. I mean, I do confess, I've been in a few games, even recently, where I've been like, let me just see what happens if my character does this. But that's also been stuff that's been in character, and I've made sure that it was going to be important to the character, important to the plot, even if I knew it was going to screw everything up. I'm like, all right, let's just see if and in most cases, it led to a more interesting story, even if it didn't complete our goal. All right, so I'm just going to dump all this stuff in there. Yeah, I really enjoy like the session zero character development end of things. To me, that's almost like I almost, even though I've kind of got this really hard rule now that unless a game's going to be something that is somewhat enduring, I really don't want to spend a lot of time making a character, which we talked about during the backstory thing. Um, I, I really enjoy what goes into creating characters and conceptualizing characters. And what's funny is, and I've said this, I've been very open about this. I've always been told I'm a very good writer and just write novels, and when it comes to creating characters for fiction, I have no interest. I have zero interest in making fictional people up and have them run around these worlds in my head. Whereas creating a setting, something like this, where it's interactive and people are developing their own worlds and their own narratives using what I've made. I actually quite enjoy that. I think that's alphabetical for FH. Yeah, it's alphabetical. Except for the one. that's out of order. Yeah, it's funny because as I've never been shy about, I'm from old school gaming where whatever stat you placed was this was more important or helped define your character or what you do with your character. Whereas I'm thinking about some of the newer games I have looked at. What's been nice about it is I know all about this world before I ever make a character. So I think I'm gonna start organizing this a little bit. All right. Even though a person looking at this document won't necessarily, for example, know what you know the gifts, item of power, or station do. I think most people reading these games are smart enough to figure this out, that it has something to do with you know this culture's access to certain things. This is the oldest repository. Their culture is the oldest repository of knowledge in this world. So it makes sense they might have access. A character might have access to these things. How does this talk about the different castes? Oh, what do you know? I say they come from a caste, but I don't actually tell them what the caste. Oh, I mentioned it down there. It's not very clearly. and cultures. Hello, Bobicus. How are you? Thanks for joining. A slight delay of seeing the chats is when I'm working in another window. OBS doesn't pop it up. It's a little annoying. It's the only annoyance I have so far. Yeah, I'm making the system. Thanks. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm working on a game. It's a sword and sorcery game. Yeah, I know. It's kind of there is a bit of a lag with this chat. That's my only issue. So yeah, Bob, because we got a sword and sorcery game set in a kind of antique, world that's similar to our own Fertile Crescent, only of course with magic, and kind of late post-Roman cultures and adjacent cultures going on. Right now, I'm just looking to see what I'd actually done as far as the politics of this region. Yeah, I'd set it up to refresh automatically in terms of the chat, and it just won't do it. I'll have to do a little more research on that. All right. So I didn't actually name the current magistrate. All mayors. Governors. Wars? Yeah, local governors. One down. 38,000 more to go. Where are they? So yeah, when I get to oh cool, craft things, building relationships. Yeah, so this is something that's interesting. That's this Blades in the Dark. I haven't. I looked at that. I think I actually played a short game of that a friend of mine ran. Fate, yeah, Fate, and again, Fate takes it to such a degree. This whole idea of we've talked a lot about that. So Wednesday nights, I do kind of a an open discussion where I throw out a topic on gaming here on Twitch, and guys who are on now and a number of other people often pop in and give some input. But Fate comes up a lot because it's definitely a different way of looking at gaming and character creation and story creation. I've got a social system in place for this. It's not as defined as I'd like it, but I'm still in progress. Thanks for stopping in. Yeah, if hate versus generic. It's generic, but from what I've been seeing of it, and I think I only played a short play of it at either a con or online at some point. That was like a horror based game. It was generic, but it was really allowed for this story development to occur, which was kind of cool, kind of almost impulsive story development. So we got actually it looks like from what Twitch is telling me, got quite a few folks lurking on here today. Greetings all. I am John, and I am working on Tales of the Harrowed Land role-playing game, which for at least the next year is more or less my job. Hopefully will be released. Go to foxandboardgames.com. Check it out a little bit more. So also you kind of get into this rabbit hole. For example, this culture that's cast driven. I mean, I could do a whole supplement just on the city and the casts within it. It could be this whole other game, really, just in this one city. And maybe I'll get there at some point. I hope so. It's kind of thrilling. And thrown to be like, wow, I could just do a whole source book just on this. And the cool thing about designating something a group and using something like Fate is that it's so versatile for such a variety of games. It could mean an intimate group of characters that are really familiar with each other. Or it could be, a Shadowrun style collection of gangsters or criminal elements who come together. So it's an interesting question there, Wendell. Um, yeah, that's like this whole other set of lectures and podcasts on it. So what I really started with is what is the character and the flavor of each city and culture that I wanted. And I took it from a very impressionistic perspective. Of course you can't do this and not draw on your real world reference. To say you're making something up that's totally unique and original for a human culture is just ridiculous. So, I kind of did the geography first, placed where I wanted the cities, and then I thought, well, what geographically, climatically do each of these places resemble? For example, the Meluk they live primarily in the Great Plains that take up the center part of the continental mass that the players characters first encounter. They are horse a horse culture, so there's the obvious reference there of the people of the Mongolian steppes. That was one of the horse cultures I looked at. Native American horse cultures that developed. And then I kind of said, yeah, but it's more savannah like and kind of humid and grassy and this kind of spanning swamp throughout it and a great coastal and rocky a great swampy and rocky coastal line. And I decided the people would be darker skinned, kind of like some of the original inhabitants of the Fertile Crescent down through the Mediterranean, North Africa, and through maybe even through parts of India and East Africa. So that's kind of how I approached it. Now, the naming was a bit arbitrary. Like, I decided to just make this Yoruba. Their language is Yoruba, which is Nigerian or Nigerian sourced. So they definitely have an African feel to the culture, in addition to being a horse culture. But I didn't want to take one thing specifically. Now, they don't actually have a vast city. They have one larger stronghold that's more of a fort city, and then it's mostly camps throughout. Whereas the Hapshar, who I've talked a lot about in Nakarth, are that's the like last Monday or the Monday before I was mapping it. They are migrants to that city. That city was originally part of a former empire that had fallen apart, and they took over the city. But they are that city is this kind of winding mass of spires and labyrinthine streets and you know ancient architecture, pre-imperial or imperial era architecture that's kind of fallen into decay. Like there's an old Colosseum style amphitheater there that they actually use, but there's a lot of other structures in the city. So how I and I decided I wanted that to have this decayed, post-empirical, almost Melbournean feel from the Elric novels. That it's this kind of sleepy place that's caught in this strange half-life, this dream. And there are these people ruling it who have this nobility about them, but they're also kind of degenerate, and dark. Whereas the Melek, I wanted to be very earthy, very connected to the land. And in fact, the mythology that I made up for them is entirely connected to the grasslands and the trees and the grasslands. So, that's kind of my approach. How I present it, that's what I'm actually working on right now. And that was my comment early on. Excuse me. Do I just give them the block stats? Do I just give an entry, a wiki entry? I give a brief description on the website. So I'll go over there now. Are you going to give me the website? Sometimes the screen share gets a little squirrely too. It kind of gets stuck, like along with the chat. Sometimes it just won't refresh. Hello. Could you show me the screen? I would appreciate it if you did. Let's see if I move it. Oh, I could just share the whole screen. Let me refresh it. That might be it. That did it. I don't know why. That worked that time. So, if I go to the website and I go to the games, let's jump right to the game world. I just give a brief, almost kind of blurb right up here on the website, just so that anybody who pops by has this general idea of what kind of people they are and what the game looks like and feels like and the culture that it's supposed to evoke. And the cities, I base the cities off of real or mythological places. Magrelin, where the Rubari are from, is very Babylonian. And like I said, the city in Akarth is this kind of husk. The other major city is yog-sothoth in the south is this kind of desert fort, arid mountainous fortress city, and the Suat the Meluk city, as I said, is more of a kind of an encampment, a very large encampment. The Great Plains is a place, so. Let's see. That's spelled correctly. What I really tried to avoid was taking this culture from our world and just dropping it into this land. That's kind of been, in my opinion, the failing of RPGs. That there's no attempt to use cultures in a way to create something original and fresh, but referential. I mean, obviously, like I said, I'm not going to be so arrogant as to sit and go, "Oh, I made all this up," and there's nothing like it. Yeah, it's just not realistic. Let's see. Okay. The individual city maps is something that I started working on the cards a little bit last time just to give myself a break and do something different than writing. But that's not something I've spent enough time on yet. I think what I'm going to do is detail one city in the initial book. That's kind of the starting city, or that the intro adventures are set in, and then I'll probably put out an expansion for other source books, other city books, or city supplements. Maybe I'll do all of the other major cities in one book, or I'll depending how it goes. Take a very brief break. I shall be right back. right? I'll have to go back through, completely revise some of the gift allotments. The gifts have changed so much. That'll probably be the next major revision. Guess I should come up with flavor text for each of these too. Only a few things to do. A few things to work on. It's funny, during one of the play tests and dealing with one of the Hapshire houses, one player was like, "You've read a lot of Dune, haven't you?" And I said, "Well, maybe there was some influence from the noble houses of Dune that crept into this culture, especially the kind of degenerate, the Harkonnens, though they didn't meet anybody quite as severe as the Harkonnens, but close. There's definitely a little bit of that overtone creeping in. As I said, I took more from Elric, I think. And the other artists, writers can testify. One of the hardest things you can do is decide what to not put into a game and spend time on, at least initially. Like, I have so many other thoughts for all these different cultures, and I want to just throw it all in there, but I want to get it done too. I want to get the core book done and floating out there, and then add on to it, because it's like I could go on forever with just one of these cultures. That's my whole life. I mean, that's the creative life. And there are people who just get really, really good at one thing and they just monofocus on it. And I've never been that person. I mean, even the things I'm good at, I tend to jump around a lot. I'm really trying to stop that. You know, I'm getting to the point in life I want to get some things done and out there. It served me well in education. I mean, I went from Bucks to a year off to walking into a situation that I was specifically hired full time because I could teach this variety of things at some level of proficiency: audio, photography, a little bit of film theory, a little bit of lecture based stuff, and then of course graphic design. And I it's nice, but I kind of want to get my own stuff and identity out there now. I don't need to really focus. Yeah, I mean that's the problem. To work anywhere or do anything, Wendell, you have to almost be monofocused, right? Like that's it's very tough to exist as a jack of all trades now. Maybe 30 years ago it was a little different with technology based work, but now like hyper specialization is the way, and it's tough. I mean, I've always been good at creative things, but so few creative things can ever produce a living. And in fact, I had a conversation with a longtime friend of mine recently who says, as long as I've known you, you've gone from thing to thing. And I'm like, well, part of that is I've only ever been good at and enjoyed a couple things: writing, music, which I've only really gotten good at in the past 10 years, let's say 5 to 10 years. I would argue the past 3 years I've gotten better at it than I had the previous 13. That's because I focused. I had the time due to being at home during the pandemic, working from home, to just dig in and really get good at something. But and visual arts, painting and drawing, yes, photography. And photography you can make a living at, but man, I did that for a while, and it's soulless. I mean, you can do some cool stuff, but it's you realize that people don't care about your photography and your skill and your art. They just want that damn picture, and you have to kind of reconcile that. So I've reconciled a lot of that, and I'm actually going to be getting my photo stuff back up and running this fall. I'm a little more commercially focused. No weddings though. No weddings and kid portraits. Though, hey, I'd make money, right? I've got some other avenues I'm exploring to incorporate the photography and the digital imaging work in a way that I can make some money long term. Because I've not made it a secret I don't want to stay in education the rest of my life. So I'd like to go out and do my own stuff. So the game design, the game writing is becoming a major focus. And, of course, music's always going to be there. Making a living at that is extremely tough, especially here in the US, especially doing what I do. If I played, cello or violin to a high level of proficiency, I could get gigs or jazz or stuff like that, but classical or jazz. But, you know, not too many people say, hey, I've been looking for a medieval bagpipe and hurdy-gurdy player. You're just what I need. I'm going to hire you. I mean, maybe for like a one weekend thing, but not as an actual mainstay. My good friends, longtime creative mentors, and first photo and web design professor said, your life would be a lot easier if you liked shooting pictures of flowers and kittens. So I was like, yeah, I know. That's I understand this. That goes back to what I said earlier too. This part of why I'm doing these streams is to force focus. To force accountability, to sit here and work for a period of time and get it done. you know. Listening to music. Yeah. Oftentimes when I'm writing, I do listen to music. When I'm not doing this, of course. I think I tried that once really early on, and it was just way too much noise to signal ratio. So cut that one right out. But I do know people who do it. I mean, they stream it very low in the background or in another device, and then they play it. But yeah, I listen to quite a bit of music when I write. If I am drawing, painting, or even painting miniatures, I almost always have music going. Yeah, that definitely helps set a tone in how you're writing. That's I tend to find that if I'm, you know, writing darker horror stuff, I'll listen to like black metal or something like that has this really creeping, aggressive tone. Yet, if I'm gonna write something that's kind of more pastoral or you know kind of your traditional medieval town, then of course I'll listen to the medieval stuff, or perhaps I'll throw on some classical. Um, I'll usually make a playlist for games too, for a specific era or mood for during the game, and I'll listen to a lot of that while I'm working on the game. So really 4:04 already? Wow. I'm going out this for 2 hours. Crazy. I'll be out for a little bit more. I have to get a few other things done, but let's see. Don't need that at the moment. Don't need that at the moment. Hadn't really developed a narrative voice for this part of the rule set yet. It's very textbooky, and I'm trying to break that. Realizing how boring it is for me to read over, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm gonna make this a little more interesting to read. So I just got to notice, unfortunately, some people here, people are still on. Here's outline. Yeah, I do a lot of outlines. I do a lot of outlines. Um, in fact, everything I wrote originally were just outlines and charts, flow charts, different race, well, not race, different cultures, different locations, different motives, different, you know. So I'll just tell you guys, since I've got a few people on here, I've just been told it's been made official. My folk metal band Teshele is going on a more or less indefinite hiatus. It's sad. And it's timely because we're all sword and sorcery based and have the whole Conan look, which tied in with my writing of this game. I mean, that all started kind of in tandem. It's all just logistics. It's nothing against anyone. There's no arguments or issues like that. It is just we're all over the place. It's centrally located in Baltimore. I'm 3 hours away. One of our drummer just moved 2 hours to the Eastern Shore. Other people live between 45 minutes and an hour in any direction from the city, and it's just been a nightmare trying to keep it physically, literally together. And it's sad because it's that everyone's so good, everyone's so talented. It's just one of those things. So we've been debating the past couple days as to how we were going to deal with this because we had another practice that just fell apart Sunday. Again, through no one's fault. It's just the way it is. But yeah, I just got the note from Brett that the official word is up. So that's unfortunate. But it's the way things go. I mean, part of it was me because I was like, look, I can't keep driving 3 hours if it's not going to happen. One way. I just can't. Just physically, financially, mentally, I can't. So, we're getting cat bombed. It's coming up to 4 o'clock. The cat bombing has occurred. He's convinced he may starve to death any moment, despite his nickname is Pudge, because he's the pudgy of the two cats. He's a rare cryptid called a Pudgewalla. Right? I'm going to slither down here any minute. Maybe. The other one's the one that climbs all over me more than he does. So here you go. Slithering cat. Here you go. Over here. There. They get much friendlier as feeding time comes up. He's also cost me $100 when he bit the side of my monitor and put a hole in it. The guy at the Apple store was like, "Do you have a cat?" I'm like, "Me? No. What about cats? I don't know anything about cats." There's this puncture mark in the side of my monitor. I was like, "Oh, cat." Because it, of course, damaged the display. I was like, "Really? Did you really just cost me that money?" Yeah, yeah, seriously. Hey, Blake. It's a ridiculous cat. A pudgy cat. Yes, you are. Thanks for tuning in, Blake. I saw you said you were going to have it on in the background while you were doing stuff. No. There we are. Bring up backstory again. Cat, come on. I'm starting to eyeball the screen again to get my attention. Yeah, Brett and I talked a lot about it. This is Blake dressing the band, which I filled him in on some of my discussions with them and stuff about. Yeah, no, I mean, it just wasn't. It really wasn't. This was all part of the discussion earlier that it had stopped being viable a while ago, and we were trying to keep it running. And especially when the drummer Dan moved back to the eastern shore of Maryland, which is almost 2 hours away in the other direction. I mean, again, there's only so much you can do, and you can do a lot online these days. I don't even know how he finds this stuff. The cat just found this old set of earbuds that I have no idea were even here. He just walked out from behind the desk with them, and I have no idea where they even were. Um, Obviously, they were behind the desk, but you can do a lot online these days. But in terms of live music practice, especially something with like 5 instruments and 2 vocalists, or even 3 instruments, 1 vocalist, everybody has to have a really strong connection. Talk about the latency. You see latency and lag on this. You have to invest usually in a professional level piece of software to do it, and it's just not doable. I mean, we've talked about like, okay, do we still want to like keep in touch and work on maybe writing some stuff? And my only comment to that was, I mean, I'm not object to it, but somebody else has to start it. Like if someone comes to me and says, I have this thing I need a bagpipe for, what do you think about this part? Could you add this part? Then I'd be game. But again, I'm not going to be the motivator and attempt to keep it rolling. And it's just it's too much work. It's, with that many people, with wrangling people. Again, it's not even anyone's real fault. As I said, our chat this morning was very productive. It just there isn't much really we can do at this moment. You see, Blake, here's the line. Most of all, the character should be fun for the player, the overseer, and any other players involved. Not that we ever knew anybody who compulsively made characters that were a problem for everybody but themselves. Yeah, never happened. More game sessions than we care to remember. My character wouldn't really do that. That's going to be our topic Wednesday night, I think. Problem players, what I'm defining as people who are perpetually disruptive to the group, and the group having fun. That's how I'm going to define it because it's like Thomas when Wendell Burke brought up Tom Platt brought up this idea like, but what if a person just doesn't go along with everything and the rest of the group ends up hating them? Which, having been that person in real life, I totally get that. You know, you don't follow the crowd in this particular social situation, so you're the a hole. But In this case, I'm thinking of players that just are habitually like the ones who create the problem at the table for whatever reason. I mean, maybe they don't even realize it, and that's a big part of the going to be hopefully a big part of the discussion. How do you manage this? Like sometimes people don't realize that no one else is having fun with them. Other times they're keenly aware of it. All right, I think that's it for today, friends. I got got a couple hours in. A lot of writing done, a lot of revision done, a lot of organization in terms of the player character creation document, like what goes where, how to phrase things. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for chatting. A couple new people popped in today, which is cool. It's always cool. As I mentioned, the big news for today is, I mean, aside from the band news, which has nothing to do with this particular project. Yeah, thanks for coming on. Is that Fox and Boar website is live. Even from earlier this weekend, it evolved significantly when I got some more time with it the last 2 days. News, games, about media, all the streaming info. Of course, my lovely face appears everywhere. Then we have our obligatory end of broadcast message. Please stop by to the website. By the way, all my existing sites, such as HarrowedLandRPG.com, FromTheTomes.com, now all point to the main site, so it's all unified, which was one of my intentions in doing it. Obviously, if you're watching this on Twitch, feel free to click the subscribe button and go over to the YouTube channel and like that as well. If you're seeing this on YouTube for the first time, please consider coming to the Twitch channel and enjoying some banter and enjoying some discussions. Twitter and Facebook. And of course, everybody, thanks for continuing to support this. I literally couldn't do this without everybody who's tuning in and following the progress of this game. So thanks, everyone, and I'll see you next time.